Join me, if you will, in our prayer of illumination. Word of God, speak. Would you pour down like rain, washing my eyes to see your majesty, to be still and know that you're in this place. Please let me stay and rest in your holiness. Word of God, speak. May the Word of God speak to us today. I'll be reading chapter 5, verses 1 through 19 of 2 Kings. It's a very familiar story, but hear healing in this. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At the time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet," the king of Aram told him. "I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out, carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, "With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him: "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana, and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went out in a rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, "All right, but please allow me to load two of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master, the king, comes into the temple of the god Rimmon to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too." Go in peace, Elisha said. So Naaman started home again. And this is definitely the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. There are other readings for today, the gospel lesson and the New Testament lesson. And I hope you'll go back and read those. But today I want us to really look at Naaman and at our psalm and see how they go hand in hand and in our hands with us. Naaman, he was a man who had authority. He had power. He was a man that was second probably only to the king, though we're not told exactly that high up, but we are told he's a commander in his army. So he's someone that had authority. He's someone that people looked up to and knew, and now this man has leprosy, which is automatically going to now make this man of power an outsider in his own country. He's going to, if this doesn't work and help him, he's going to have to be put away somewhere, away with other lepers. He's not going to be with his family. He's not going to be commanding any army. He will now be an outcast. He will be unclean. He will be not a noteworthy person at all. Naaman's an arrogant man. And as we read this scripture and any scripture, try and find yourself in it. See what resonates with you. Make it come on home and come into your life and into my life. See where it resonates with us. I know for me sometimes I can be pretty arrogant. I can be, yeah, but I'm Carol. Come on. Come on, Lord. Don't you know who I am? And sometimes God will say, yeah, I do. But I know more than what you know. See, Naaman was not a man of God. Naaman was, however, a man that God knew. And we can all say that at some point in our lives. We may not always know God and understand his ways or like his ways, but God knows us. He knows what's going on in our families, in our churches, in our communities, in our own lives. He knows, and here he is faced with a man who does not know God. He knows this other God. He knows Remnant. He knows other gods of the area. But God uses him. God doesn't look at him and say, well, dude, you've got leprosy. And you are not an Israelite. You do not follow me, so I will have nothing to do with you. God doesn't do that. God looks at Naaman. He sends, of all things, a little Israelite girl to say, I know where you can get help. He doesn't send another commander. He sends a child. He sends a girl. He sends a maid of the commander's wife. He sends a nobody. You know, sometimes I can think of myself as a nobody. I'm sure others of us here have had times when we think of ourselves as a nobody, and how in the world is God going to use me? God says, there's nobody. There are no nobodies in my world. I can use anybody, but you just got to go and you got to do what I tell you to do. And this little girl obeys, and she does what she is told. And this leads to Naaman being healed. And that's the main thing I want us to focus on today in this particular passage, because we are looking at communion. God's grace, God's healing poured out on us in that way. And we're looking at healing that God brings into our lives in his way. Naaman had his own ideas of how he should be healed, and we can do that. Lord, you know what I need to be healed of, and this is how I expect you to do it. And we may not say it in those many words, but we know exactly how we want God to heal us, what we need healing of, and when we want him to do it. We already have that already in our minds. And God will come along and say, think again. I've got it mapped out in ways you cannot fathom and understand. And this is why when Randy told me I had an appointment. And at the time, I didn't know exactly where, but one of the first things in my mind was, we're going to have a healing service. Because I know the power of a healing service. In 2015, September, when everything went haywire on the 2nd, and it spread to brain, spine, lung, bronchial tube, I knew then I had to sit down from the pulpit and deal with what was going on, and I knew I'd have side effects because I'm a side effect kind of gal. So I knew that, and I knew I wouldn't be able to do what I needed to do as a preacher. September 13th, that was my last Sunday at Warren Plains in Jerusalem. And so I had a combined service. I knew I didn't have what it takes to do 2 services like usual. And our DS, Randy, and he was there. And that was a surprise, but he didn't say anything. So I had the service as usual. And as I'm getting ready to do the benediction, him and my good friend and board chair comes forward, and he starts a modified, shortened healing service. He's got his oil handy. He anoints me with oil. He prays with me. Debbie's holding my hands. And people, there's just something special when you feel that kind of power connecting with you. Naaman is now going to be feeling that kind of power when he knows God's healing. It looked like for a while that I wasn't healed, not physically, and I still don't think I am physically. I'm pretty sure I'm not. But there are all kinds of healings. There's a spiritual healing, and that's where I am now. There's an emotional healing. All of us go through stuff, and sometimes our emotions are all over the map. They can run wild, we can be depressed, we can be angry, we can be bitter, we can know joy. And sometimes it all just kind of runs into each other, and sometimes we stagnate in one place. And we may know the root ball, sometimes we may not know the root ball because it happened so long ago. But God says, I know what you need. I know the healing that you need. And it may not be what you want and are praying for, but I know what you need. He can be at work healing our psyches. He can be at work healing our spirits, our emotions, our bodies. He can make combinations. I cannot explain how I went from being at death's door to now, 3 years later, I'm back standing in a pulpit. I can't explain it, and I don't have to. God knows. And that's enough. And that's what the healing service is really kind of all about in a nutshell. Because I've had a few texts and a few messages and a few phone calls from everybody, not just one church. A lot of times folks don't really understand a healing service. And it's not necessarily somebody will walk away, throw down their cane, and walk again. But God's at work, healing those emotions. Healing where we need forgiveness. He'll say, okay, Carol, you know the pain you caused 30 or 40 years ago. You need to deal with that now while you can. You need to get forgiveness now. You need to forgive that you're hanging on to. You need to forgive. That's a healing. When we can do that and forgive or seek out forgiveness, that's a tremendous healing. And sometimes we'll find that as we're healed of these things, our bodies get better. And in ways we don't understand because so many things are connected in our lives. Naaman here, he's told something that on the surface to him is an insult. He is this high and mighty man, and he's got all these clean waters that he could go to, and he's told, you go to the Jordan River, you go to where I tell you to go, and when he does, he is completely healed. He is totally changed. But it's not just a physical healing. Because he listens to God, the best healing of all comes, and it's not physical. It's not being healed of his leprosy. It's knowing the true God. No more following Rimmon. But now he says, there is only one God in Israel. That's who I'm going to be alive with from now on. That's the healing I really need. And that's the healing he not only gets, but his leprosy is cured as well. He is totally healed for right now, as well as any person can be as a human being. And we look at our psalm that we just read, and where our Psalter uses the word foes. This one will use the word enemies, and a lot of our more modern translations will use enemies. Y'all, we know enemies. And they're not always people. My enemy's melanoma. Many of you, it's another cancer. It's a heart disease, depression, anxiety, PSTD. There are so many things that are our enemies. And from the very first, David tells us, and he tells us all, I will exalt you, Lord, for you rescued me. You refuse to let my enemies triumph over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you restored my health. You brought me up from the grave, O Lord. You kept me from falling into the pit of death. Talk about something resonating. I encourage you to read all Psalms. Bring them into your life. Because if you really read them with the emotion that David has with each one, you will see anger. You will see joy. You'll see love. You'll see questioning. You'll see all these things that are so human. But the first thing David does in all of this, I'm exalting you, God. Do we exalt God when he rescues us? Do we expect him to rescue us? Or do we wallow? Notice his verbs, his tenses. I will, for you, rescued me. You refused. You didn't let my enemies, you didn't let my cancer, you didn't let my heart disease, you didn't let my emotions, you didn't let anything triumph over me. It may have been a long battle, but the victory is the Lord's. And sometimes that victory comes when we die, and we're rid of all this, and we are completely restored to health and life. But often he gives us glimpses. I've seen a glimpse of being restored. Others have been given that glimpse of being brought up from the grave because he didn't let us fall into that pit. We'll fall into it one day, and he'll get us out, and he'll say, okay, God, flip over to 23. He will tell us, the Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, we walk through. We may stop and tarry, but we're walking through. We never stop for good. We're walking through the darkest valley. I will not be afraid, for you are close to me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. See, we've got this ending we're going towards. We've got this feast that's prepared for us in the presence of our enemies, in the presence of my cancer, in the presence of others' heart disease, in the presence of others' troubles and trials and issues and problems. They will be there at that feast. They're going to be watching from afar while we feast. All those things that have brought us down, they're not going to exist anymore, and he will be lifting us up because God has prepared a feast for us in the presence of my enemies, and he's going to be the one anointing our heads with oil. This is just a foretaste. And his goodness and unfailing love definitely pursues us all the days of our lives. pursue us. Sometimes we feel like he's caught us and we're wrapped in his arms, and sometimes we do run, we do question, we don't understand. And he pursues us. He doesn't ever look at us and say, well, if that's what you think and that's how you're going to act, well, I'm just done with you. He never does that to us. He never does that to our families. He never does that to our churches. He pursues us with unfailing love for as long as we live. And just as surely as this mortal life will end, we will live in his house forever. It may be our church, but it's his house. This is the house of the Lord. This is his home. And this is where, in heaven, we will be with him forever and ever. That's a long time. We can't imagine eternity. We can't imagine what it's going to be like. But the day will come when we will know. But in the meantime, he blesses us with Holy Communion, which is first and foremost a sacrament, but it is God's blessing to us. And you may be wondering, why in the world did you print all this out? Because this are the readings that go with the healing service, which is in the book of worship. And I wanted y'all to have a copy. I thought that would be a good thing for you to have a copy of. You might want to take some and share with others. In the words, it kind of explains why we do this and why this is needed. So I invite you to join with me in the great Thanksgiving. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right to give our thanks and praise.
It is right and a good and joyful thing, always and everywhere, to give thanks to you, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. In the beginning, when darkness covered the face of the earth and nothing existed but chaos, your spirit swept across the waters. You spoke but a word, and light was separated from darkness. And so with your people on earth and all the company of heaven, we praise your name and join their unending hymn.
Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might, heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest.
Holy are you, and blessed is your Son, Jesus Christ, who lived among us and knew human pain and suffering.